The $1,000,000 question: how do entrepreneurs transition from self-employed to owning a business that turns a profit? My name is Chris Waters, and this podcast has the $1,000,000 answer. Welcome to CEO Secrets. Hey guys, it's your host, Chris Waters of CEO Secrets. I've got an incredible guest on today, John Fish, who is the chairman and CEO and sole proprietor of Suffolk. It's a massive company, $5 billion in revenue, 2,500 employees, offices spread out across the U.S. from Boston, New York, Miami, Palm Beach, Tampa, Dallas, Los Angeles. I mean, I'm so honored to have you on the show today. John, welcome to CEO Secrets. I can't wait to drop some nuggets on our audience this morning.
Chris, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you very much for your time and look forward to the conversation.
Well, we were talking right before the show. You have 3 girls. I have 2 girls. And I also know you are currently chair of the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and you do a lot of stuff outside of just, the company you run. I'm looking at the list here. You're on the chair of the board of directors at the Real Estate Roundtable, and you serve as on the executive committee for the Real Estate Board of New York. I mean, how did you get involved in all these things? What was the motivation? Did you do it because it's good for business? Like, how did all this come about? All these things you invest your time in outside of your primary company that's already massive and has, 2,500 people.
Chris, it probably relates back to my story, to be honest with you. And what it is, I was born and raised into a 4th generation construction family, and always enjoyed the business. And when I was young, I always struggled in school. And what I didn't realize at that point in time that I was dyslexic, and worked through
no way.
School into high school, it became more and more pronounced. And so I didn't learn to read until I was in 9th grade. And I couldn't spell, and you could never read my handwriting. And finally I went to a prep school called Tabor Academy, and I met this coach named Dick Duffy. And he sort of took me under his wing, and he sort of identified me because I was a pretty good football player at that point in time. And he said to me, listen, if you could do well on the field, you can do well in the classroom. Don't be intimidated by the classroom. And he introduced me to a tutor, and the tutor started working with me to teach me how to read, how to write. I can't spell today past 3rd grade, but that doesn't bother me. I look at that as an advantage. And as a result of that, I did well, coming out of Tabor Academy. I went to Bowdoin College. And at Bowdoin, the only reason I got into Bowdoin College was the only school in the country that didn't require SAT scores. I got twin 400s. And back in 1978, I had very good grades, but I had no test scores. As a result of that, I entered into Bowdoin. And I would say this respectfully, Bowdoin is really where I learned to read and where I learned to write. And it allowed me to confront my weaknesses that I had. And as I sort of graduated from Bowdoin and got into the Suffolk business and started realizing some, moderate successes, I realized that it's time for me to start giving back at an early age. So it was right around 28, 29, 30 that I really started getting myself involved in boards in different nonprofits, because I said to myself, there's no way I ever would have achieved some of the limited successes that I've had if somebody didn't help me. And so I look fondly back at my high school days and said, if it wasn't for that Coach Duffy, who I take care of today, by the way, he's almost 85 years old, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And I love what I do. But it's like anything else, that never forget where you came from, and to whom much is given, much is expected.
John, I cannot believe what you just said. This is going to be a great 30 minutes we spend together. I have to tell you something wild. So I, through grade school, struggled immensely with reading and writing. They didn't know what was wrong with me. And they said, I was a very hyper kid. They put me on Riddled. They said I had ADHD, and I still, struggled with reading and writing. Made it through school. I just did terribly at reading and writing, and I played football too. I failed out. I failed one period of Spanish because just English and writing. I'm terrible at it. Anyways, so point of me telling you all this is, my 5-year-old, this is the first time I've ever talked about this on the show. My 5-year-old, we did a parent-teacher conference just a few weeks ago, And the teacher said, hey, I think there's a high probability your daughter has dyslexia. And she said, dyslexia is typically, hereditary. And and so she started explaining to me the things she noticed about my 5-year-old. And my 5-year-old's like, she's got a very high IQ. She's really intelligent. But the teacher said, her, ability to process a story and retell that story is very difficult. I always thought dyslexia was about like reading things backwards, but that's a very, very small component of it. So anyways, after that parent teacher conference, I started going down the rabbit hole and hearing these interviews of like, people like Steven Spielberg talking about how, he just thought he didn't find out he had dyslexia until he was in his 60s. And Steven Spielberg said he just thought it was normal to have to spend, 3 times longer to read a script than the average person. And so as I've like studied, dyslexia over the past couple of weeks, I felt like I was looking in a mirror. And I called my dad and I told my dad, I said, hey, is anybody in the family dyslexic? This teacher said, my daughter, Eva, she might have dyslexia. And I said, as I'm reading it, it sounds a lot like me. And so I'm starting to read it to my dad, and my dad's in his 60s, and I'm reading like all of the things that people with dyslexia have a problem. And my dad's like, oh my God, you're describing me.
It's interesting, as I would just share a quick story, is that I remember going to prep school, 9th grade, and they had us read a book called Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. And it was pre-reading the summer reading, and I couldn't read it. And I finally showed up at the doorstep of the school playing sports, and I said to the teacher, I'm embarrassed, I've got challenges. The school that I went to was a good school, but my dad could afford the tuition at that point in time. And but since then, it's been a blessing because somebody acknowledged that I had a learning difference, that I wasn't stupid, I wasn't dumb, because that's what they were called back then. And because I couldn't go to the chalkboard and write, and people could read it, that was okay. And so once that was identified and people cared about you, we all learn differently at the end of the day. And it just happened, dyslexics learn a different way, and they have other assets, although they have some liabilities. And I've been able to, I speak publicly about this too, is talk to young men and women about the fact, no, you aren't stupid. No, you may be different, but I assure you that you have some special characteristic that other people don't have. And if you can find that characteristic or that passion, that will catapult you to a level that you've never seen before in your lifetime. And that's what happened with me. And what I realized is that, okay, if I'm good athlete, I could become a relatively good student if I worked hard. And I just worked hard and did everything I possibly can. Now, I still, as I pointed out, can't spell past 3rd grade. You could never read my handwriting. And I've got 3 full-time assistants around me that work with me. But to me, Chris, it's an asset. And you can say this to your daughter as well, too. She'll find something in her own personality that will allow her to be heads and shoulders above her classmates. But it just needs a sense of confidence and sort of a pat in the back to say, listen, you'll get there someday. Don't ever give up the hope.
What's surprising? So I recently went to this dyslexia school to do an interview. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I think a lot more people have dyslexia than what is, people, believe, because of their preconceived notions of what it is. And, this show, the CEO Secrets, is we have, tens of thousands of people that listen that are entrepreneurs. And I think I read a statistic that 60% of entrepreneurs and CEOs are dyslexic. And so my point of bringing this up is, anybody that's listening to this is probably an avid reader. I would think. I mean, even us with dyslexia, we like to read because we appreciate the knowledge in it, even though it takes us forever. So this question is part selfish, but also I know the audience might be thinking this: what are the hacks to absorbing what you read when you buy a book? Like I heard somebody say, download the Audible and listen to Audible on 2x and read at the same time. What hacks have you, found, or what secrets have you found to help you absorb things you're reading?
I'll tell you, my new best friend is Siri. Okay. And I've got to know her pretty well. And the second thing is that when I do read books, I read them on tape, as you pointed out. And often I'll go through the tape twice, to be candid with it, because I want to absorb as much as I possibly can. I read, the newspapers every single day, Wall Street Journal, various other types of business publications that I really, really enjoy. But my sense is when I do read for pleasure, it's, going slow is something I really, really am passionate about to really gain my sense of interest. But again, like you pointed out, when you were younger, it's, having an attention deficit and being able to sit there and read something that takes some time. You have to really have the facilities to be paying very, very close attention. And sometimes with learning differences, people wander quite a bit. And so it's a pronounced focus. But I think as you get a little older in business, the devil's in the details, and you need to be extremely disciplined to overcome that somewhat of what I call liability. Because at the end of the day, once you cross that bridge, the opportunities are in front of you are absolutely amazing. And I think, to me, to your point, is that many people have been diagnosed with different sort of levels of dyslexia, if you don't mind me putting it that way. But at the end of the day, it's what you make of it. And to me, I think it was a God-given sort of diagnosis that I have, and it's made me a better person, because there's no doubt in my mind, Chris, I never would have accomplished, I say this humbly to you, the things I've accomplished. And more importantly, I never would have appreciated the importance of relationships and team memberships than I would if I didn't have this diagnosis. Because at the end of the day, it's like football. You get 11 people in the field, okay? If one person's having a tough day, it affects all the other 10 people. So how do you come together? Your chain is only as strong as your weakest link. And to me, as I built my business over a period of time of 40 years, I feel very, very successful. I've had some phenomenal people in my organization, and they've been very loyal to me. And as I sit back at the age I'm at right now, Chris, all I feel like is, what can I do for them? What can I do for their families? How do I give back to them, to the special sort of interest that you showed in me, and to make me realize my potential?
For people that are listening to this show and they want to, I have so many questions about your business, by the way, John. So yeah. I'm going off the subject. I'm going off the rails here talking about dyslexia. So you found out at a young age. What about your kid? Did your kids have it?
They all had moderate, like you pointed out about your daughter, they all had moderate forms of it, but they also had other assets that along with it, but nothing that held them back like it did myself. And I was very, very proud of that. But what I would say to you, Chris, is as a parent that's a dyslexic, what you really do, you put a tremendous amount of value in educating your children. And what we did is my wife and I of almost 38 years is really put a strong emphasis at the pre-K, K, and elementary school level of making sure our kids had access to the best educational opportunities they could possibly get. Because at the end of the day, education is a foundational thing. If kids learn to realize that reading and writing can be fun, even if you have challenges, it makes a world of difference in their growth and development as a young person. It also has a tremendous impact on their confidences at the end of the day. So to us, our three daughters, we put a lot of emphasis on that.
Well, anyways, we're gonna pivot a little bit. That I feel like, I don't know, that's just a very weird divine thing, because I'm literally right in the middle of this, and never could understand why I had such a hard time digesting books, and why it took me 3 times longer than the normal person to read a book. But but to your point, there's so many gifts that come with dyslexia. Like Steven Spielberg says in his interview when he's talking about having dyslexia and discovering it in his 60s, that because he rereads this, he takes 3 times longer, he retains a significantly higher percentage of the script, and he remembers and pays attention to all these little details because he's so aware of, having to be really careful to digest everything, which is what's helped him, make these, write these incredible scripts, right? So, it's a blessing in disguise. And I want to go ahead and take a minute and change directions here and talk about your company. So tell me a little bit, just for the audience that doesn't know about Suffolk, tell me a little bit about the company you built and what you guys are all about.
At the end of the day, the company, as I mentioned, pointed out, was founded in 1982. My dad lent me some money to start this organization. My brother, interesting enough, Chris, was much brighter and smarter than I was. He went to Princeton. So he took over the family business, and it was a union business. And so my dad said, listen, would you be interested in starting a non-union business? I cannot get involved in it, but I can support you behind the scenes. And so he lent me $80,000 to start Suffolk. The family business was a company called Peabody. And during the period of time, what happened was that, we started growing pretty quickly as an organization. And the company eventually worked in the Northeast part of the country, grew to the Southeast, and then the Southwest. And before almost 2000, we became almost a $2.5 billion business at the end of the day. And we did that by sort of doing a lot of repeat business, with clients all over the country and building a reputation of a high level of client service.
What was the timeline? How long did it take to get up to 5 billion?
No, right now we've been in business 40 years. So right
Okay.
around 2000, 2005, the company grew to be about a $2 billion business.
Okay.
We were very, very fortunate. But what happened is that the most important thing about any business is building a team, having relationships, and leveraging those relationships. And I think our value proposition over a period of time was our culture as an organization. I'm sure you hear that quite often. The culture we've established, and we didn't sort of, define the culture, we discovered it. And it took us almost for 15 to 17 years to discover our culture. And it was really, passion, integrity, hard work, and professionalism. People that really came to work, wanted to work with each other and make a difference in their job every single day. And it was sort of very interesting to watch it form over a period of time. And as we were able to galvanize as a company and spread that magic, what I call, out on a national basis, it really allowed us to continue to grow the company and take on some of the most complex projects throughout the country. And we feel very, very fortunate about that.
So you're in the construction services business.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Tell me, to explain to the layman person listening what that means.
Well, let me try to start out by telling you first what the real estate construction business is. The construction real estate business is about 4 to 5%, Chris, of GDP. And after the Industrial Revolution, it really took off in a significant way. But unfortunately, what happened was the industry became very, very fragmented and disconnected. And all of a sudden, inefficiencies started to show up in the business. So as a result of that, what happened was productivity over the last 50 years were the only category in the business today of all businesses, the productivity has gone down over the last 50 years as opposed to gone up. And why that is because people haven't invested in the business for the long term. It's all about instant gratification. We've taken a different tact here at Suffolk. What we've invested in heavily is data. We have a clean data lake. It took us 6 or 7 years to establish that. And we leverage technological tools. So as I often say, at Suffolk, we bring a different set of tools to work every single day. Our toolbox is different. And so as a result of that, what's happened is, as we started the organization with that level of curiosity, okay, we grew that nationally, and we built, whether it be schools, college, universities, aviation, airports, hospitality buildings, different type of athletic complexes. So a variety of different categories. And most of our business, Chris, is repeat business. And what I would say to you is, because of the technologies we use as a company, we get ourselves involved in very sophisticated, complicated projects throughout the country. For an example, there's a $1.8 billion project we did down in Hollywood, Florida, called the Seminole Hollywood Guitar. It's by the Seminole Indians. We built that. It's almost a 38-story guitar tower right down there in Hollywood, Florida, for the Seminole Indians, Hard Rock. And it's absolutely a spectacular job. You would not have been able to build that building probably about 15 years ago because of the complexity. And whether it be a project like the Encore Boston, another casino we built, is almost a $2 billion job.
You guys built the Encore?
We built the Encore in Boston, which is
wow.
Yeah. And then the same thing, other projects, at MIT, we work on, we work at, in UCal out in Berkeley, out in California, but all over the country, but projects that are really curious in the sense that they're detailed, they're complex, and allows our people to show up every single day with a sense of pride and authorship of building some of the most complex projects in the country, if not the world. And so we feel very, very fortunate that way doing that.
Wow. I was reading an article by the Harvard Business Review, and it's they send out these monthly magazines with updates on various things education-wise for business leaders. And something they were talking about is how the culture of an organization can change over time, depending on where you are in the growth stage. So would you say you guys are more in the growth stage now, or more in a mature stage where it's just like, just steady growth? And you had mentioned taking 17 years to identify the culture of the business. Is it possible the core values of the people within the organization and the culture changed as a result of the growth? I mean, what's been your experience with that?
Chris, I'd say this. I don't think the culture has changed. I think the culture has become more pronounced and has become more cult-like over a period of time. Mm-hmm. As we all know, as you grow your organization on a national scale, it's very difficult to maintain because you have cultural dilution. And it's something I think every 7 years as a CEO, You have to sort of come back to true north from a cultural point of view. And I think we've done that because there's a tendency to have a little bit of drift. But when I take a look at Suffolk over the last 40 years, I break it down really into sort of different segments, each chapter. As I say, the first chapter, the first 10 years was brawn versus brain. You thought that you could do it all by yourself, and relationships, I underestimated the importance of relationships. As we went into the second sort of the 90s, we all of a sudden building relationships became extremely important to me. And by building those relationships, it took the company on a national scale.
I don't want to throw you off on your chain of that, because I know where you're going here. And so when I think about one of the questions going through my head, I've thought since before we even started today, was like, what was the biggest accelerator of your growth to get to 5 billion in revenue? And it's something I'm picking up on right now, and that's why I'm asking this, is 80s brawn versus brain, 90s relationships. And then something you said earlier is that, you guys grew to 2 billion in revenue in 2001, 2, 3, somewhere in there. And so was it the relationships that is what was the accelerator of the growth in the 90s? And if it was, what specific relationships?
I would say to you it was the relationships, and it was the cultural identification, the ability to discover our core values as a company. And what happened was, as I said to you before, we're not the right company for everybody, but we're a special type of company of people that really care and have a high degree of humility and empathy for people. And so we started working with people like back then, Marriott International, Sunrise Assisted Living, different healthcare companies throughout the country. They sort of worked with us in their local region, and they realized we could be an asset to their balance sheet. And they allowed us to work around the country with them. We've probably done over 100 hotels, and probably 35 of them have been for Marriott, Four Seasons hotels, Mandarin Oriental hotels, Montages, different things like that. Large scale developers that do multiple projects all over the country, if not the world. And having a company that you can go to as a developer to work with Suffolk, it's a real competitive advantage, because at the end of the day, most clients look for is predictability and so forth. And we as a company offer a high degree of predictability in a very unpredictable category.
So 90s was about relationships and culture. Tell me about the 20s, the 2000s.
The 2000s was pretty interesting. That's when really, I would say, the culture idea and this whole idea of what I would call a maturity decade came into being. And we started really studying Jim Collins. I don't know if you're familiar with Jim.
Good to Great,
Built to Last. The flywheel and the hedgehog concept and the BHAG. Yeah. And we used that book during the 2000s as sort of a rallying cry to really emphasize sort of good is the enemy of great. And as a result of that, it really took our culture and our people and our belief in ourselves to a whole different level at the end of the day. In fact, I reached out to Jim Collins, Chris, and I brought him in, flew him into Boston, and we had dinner one night with a guy named Michael Porter, who designed the 5 forces, or was the author of the 5 forces of competitive advantage over at Harvard Business School. He was a good friend of mine. And Jim Collins, myself, and Mike Porter had dinner one night, and I'm sitting there pinching myself. I got these 2 iconic figures in the business world having a dialogue about competitive advantage. And it was just so, I would say, stimulating to me. And then we had a sort of seminar in our company with the 2 of them at a table, where I flew people in nationally just to listen to those 2 gentlemen who are iconic in their own right, to talk about competitive advantage. And that really stoked the fire for the future of this organization. And then it brought us right into 2008, right before the Great Recession. And at that point in time was another reflecting point for the company, which is pretty interesting, because what happened at that, we had to reinvent ourselves. Here we were, confronted one of the biggest challenges in the history of the business world. In 2009, when Lehman collapsed, we lost half of our revenue within a week time. And here we are, a $2.5 billion business down to about $1.25 billion. And I'm saying to myself, what the hell am I going to do? And I'm a privately held company at that point in time. And so what I finally said, listen, we can no longer look to our category as sort of comparison companies. We need to look at other categories like Apple, Google, and IBM. And that's when we really started reestablishing what our benchmarking was as a company. We didn't want to just hang around and be around contractors. We wanted to be around technology companies that really thought outside the box. How do we figure out a way to disrupt our category by using data and using technology for the betterment, first off, of our workers, because workers won't adapt to that technology unless they know it's saving them time and giving something back to them from a freedom point of view. And the same thing with our clients. How do we sell it to them from a cost point of view to make sure they see themselves as having a better, faster, quicker, cheaper product at the end of the day? And so that really stimulated our growth and development, brought us to about a 3.5, close to a $4 billion business, what I call the revival decade. And then in 2020, which is the last decade we're in right now, is we really launched what is called Vision 2025, Chris. And that really has been a rallying cry for the organization. And I say this to you this one, by 2021, by putting out there a Vision 2025 as a strategy, one, a lot of people would say, well, you can't look that far in today's chaotic world. You only can look for strategy for 2 or 3 years out. I disagree. We planted our strategy for a 5-year period of time. We laid this out very acutely to our organization nationally. And what we have, and I very humbly say to you, we have buy-in today. And our goal is really to disrupt the construction space by becoming much more vertically and horizontally integrated in the whole built world. And so that has been our mantra for the last 2 years. And we're well on our journey right now. And hopefully by 2025, the company should be about a $6.5 to $7 billion business, vertically integrated on the capital side. We have our own Suffolk Capital, where we invest in the GP stack of the capital stack, okay? And we promote with the GP partners off the LP. And that allows us to have skin in the game the early part of the project, okay? Because typically in our business is misalignment between the developer and the contractor. Now by putting our own capital in that stack, okay, not being a developer, but being supportive and aligned, then we also have what is called Suffolk Technologies. We have our own technology fund where we make investments in technological solutions, both in the prop tech and construction tech space. And who's better to invest in those particular solutions than a company that has over 100 jobs going on in the country that can leverage those solutions to see if they work? Then we have a self-performing arm that we self-perform our own concrete, carpentry, and things like that. We have our own design firm, I said this, called Suffolk Illuminate. And the idea behind that is using digital design and data to design a building as opposed to the old-fashioned way. Then we have our core business, Suffolk Construction, which we actually build the buildings ourselves throughout the country. So what we're trying to do over the next, I'd say 3 to 4 more years, is leveraging data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning and blockchain to create a different paradigm in the real estate construction space. Now, one would ask, how can you do that as a construction company? Well, you can do it if you're privately held and you're willing not to be bitten by the instant gratification bug. I'm willing to invest millions and millions of dollars into these different technological solutions to reinforce our core business of construction. And very few companies out there are willing to do that because either they're public, they got quarterly earnings, or they're owned by multiple families or multiple shareholders. And to me, because I'm passionate about the business and I love the business, to me, it's about how do we build the best construction company in the country. And I'm not saying we're ever going to get there, but I will tell you we have the culture and the tools and the mindset to want to achieve greatness. But again, it takes time and it's a game of inches, as you know, Chris.
I've got 2 pages of notes. I'm trying to keep up with you here.
Don't mean to talk so fast. I apologize.
No, it's good, man. It's good. I just get lots of more questions. There's the total curiosity. How many billions of dollars do you have in the pipeline right now?
We have about $15 billion in backlog right now as we see it today. And as I often say to people, today, in today's day and age, notwithstanding the Ukraine issues, and my heart and soul goes out to them, the Ukrainians, is that it's not about getting work, it's about finding the right people to execute on that work. And like every other category around right now in business today, it's about people. And the idea is, the labor force participation continues to go down on a percentage basis. Mm-hmm. So how do you get more with less? And that's why we think in the construction space, how do we leverage technology to increase productivity on our job sites and maybe utilizing prefabrication or other types of delivery methods to sort of solve for this loss of productivity and the loss of labor.
I want to get to that tech stuff in just a minute, but I got some other follow-up questions, some things you have said. You talked about Jim Collins and competitive advantages. Prior to 2010, when you weren't investing in data and tech, what were your competitive advantages?
I would say our culture and our people. You know what I'm saying? Is it typically hire a lot of athletes, to be candid with you. I don't try to discriminate, but I think people that have had an opportunity to experience failure, I find those workers to be some of the most productive workers we've ever had. And typically when I interview people, myself personally, which I don't do that often other executives, I ask them, can you tell me about your worst ass kick? And I know I don't mean to be offensive when I say that, but I want to understand candidly what drives people, what motivates them. What do you do? Because business is loaded with failure. And what do you do once you do fail, especially when you become successful? How do you handle that from a humility point of view? And to me, in my business, where it's a very challenging business, I want to make sure people are resilient and they understand, listen, the best way to get ahead in life is you're not doing it by yourself. You need others supporting you to be successful. And once you start thinking about success as an individual sport, okay, you'll never survive at all. And so during the pre-2000s, before all that, it was our people and our cult-like culture at Suffolk that I was very, very proud of at the end of the day.
Are you guys still privately held, or did you?
Yes, no, I own 100% of the company myself. Very proud of that. And I think we're the largest single shareholder in the country right now of a privately held company.
How, as you're scaling and building a business, lots of people want to get a piece of equity. How have you prevented that? Like what have you done to help keep leadership on board when you can't leverage stock options and things like that?
Obviously there's things like phantom income and phantom stock and various other types of things. But what I would say is I find out the workforce today, a lot of it is that they want the money in the check. And I really believe strongly, one, benefits are a critical thing to have when you size your benefits up, always having excellent benefits. And then try to pay people anywhere from 10 to 15 to 25% more than the average organization in our category will pay. Plus bonus people very, very well. I find out a lot of the people that work in our category are raising families, trying to put their kids to school, need tuition payments and so forth. So we do have a 401k match, which is very, very successful. But to me, it's giving people the financial resources on an annualized basis that makes them feel respected, appreciated, and more financially secure during the time that they're raising their families. And knowing at the end of the day, okay, that they have an opportunity to cash in that 401k that we're creating as well. And to me, I would never want anybody to work with my organization not feeling that not being properly compensated. And so that's why we can compete with these public companies or these different ESOPs that are out there in the industry as a whole.
That's a pretty incredible thing, right? I mean, I'm sure you've met a lot of other entrepreneurs, and most people that have been in business as long as you have given up some equity. So that must be you just had a hard stand on, is to not give up equity.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a hard stand. The challenge is the construction space as a whole. It requires a tremendous amount of capital. When you start doing, our average size job is between $70 and $100 million throughout the country. We'll do a $10 million job, but we'll also do a $2.5 billion job. So the financial capabilities and resources you need to be successful in this business long-term is pretty strong. And so the barriers to entry on that sense is pretty high. But to me, I really believe in building a team that feels united. And at the end of the day, financial sort of support and resources drive people's behavior in a significant way. And I think we look at this on an annualized basis. And so far, it's worked out well for ourselves. And I'm not saying one size fits all, but I'm saying it's worked well for Suffolk.
Yeah. So the downside of having equity partners is the shareholder distribution checks reduces your ability to dictate how much money goes into, reserved cash for a rainy day, if you will, or for expansion.
Yeah, Chris, if I want to make a $5 or $10 million investment or a $20 million investment in some different area, and I do make those type of investments because I'm in the business for the long run. It's not about, I used the term before, instant gratification. I really don't want to be challenged on that. And to me, what I try to do is also what I demonstrate to people is we give probably about almost 20% of the profits of the company back to philanthropy. To me, it's a very, very big thing as an organization, giving back to different nonprofits that really, truly care to improve the quality of our community. And that makes a big difference to our team as well. We have a thing called Giving Circle that we do matches on. But to me, to support the underprivileged is extremely important to me. And that goes back to where we started this conversation. I chair the board of Boston College as well. And again, I chair the board of Brigham Women's Hospital in the real estate roundtable. And I've been involved in these type of opportunities my whole life because I feel very, very fortunate. But also, I also speak with my wallet as well, too. I believe in giving back to areas that people cannot help themselves. And that sets a tone and reinforces a culture at Suffolk.
Okay, so let me bring up the last point I want to talk about before we sign out for today. What are the use cases for AI and tech in the construction management world?
Let me give you a perfect example. Suffolk Illuminate is a digital architectural team we started formulating about 18 months ago. And what our overall goal with Suffolk Illuminate is can we design an average size building, say $100 million in 30 days? So the problem we're trying to solve for is I have t-shirts made up called X equals 30. Okay, that's what the solution is. And what we're doing is we're trying to collect data on our job sites through digitalization, cameras, and various other types of things, and storing it in a portfolio of different pictures. By using artificial intelligence, it can work through all of that data and come up with a way to design a building more cost effectively, more quickly. When you think about NASA, how they design a rocket, they use artificial intelligence and machine learning. They don't do it on the drafting boards. Elon Musk, how he designs his cars, Teslas, and various other types of complex airplanes and things like that. Our industry still uses somewhat of an archaic way of doing it. But at the end of the day, so if you have a model that you build for a building using artificial intelligence, what will happen at that point in time is the model that you just used to design your building is going to be a smart model. That model has intelligence. You'll be able to figure out where you're going to buy your doors, your frames, your windows, right? Your boiler equipment. It's going to tell you where the most cost-effective way in the world is to do that. So you're going to disrupt the supply chain by doing that as well, too. Because right now, if you're going to buy a boiler, you might go through 3 or 4 layers of middlemen to purchase that boiler. But if that model is intelligent, using artificial intelligence and machine learning, our hope and goal is we'll be able to track down the origins of that supply chain and buy it directly from the manufacturer of the base product itself by lowering the cost quite substantially. Now, I know it sounds like a BHAG, and it is, but the progress we have made over the last 2.5 years has been monumental overall as an organization. And the idea of introducing to our team here at Suffolk sort of technological solutions, it creates a high degree of curiosity on both about the company and the potential where the industry can go if you're willing to make those investments.
So you guys have cameras around the job site, and the AI scans those pictures and can pick up on things from those pictures to give you insight.
Correct.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. And also robots. We have robotic dogs called Spot. You've seen them in Boston Dynamics that run around the job site, and they can take pictures of work that was done during that day in comparison to what was told to you that was done during that day. It also can take photographs from a quality control point of view and a safety point of view. So our industry, Chris, has never really collected data. Okay, and I'm proudly to tell you that we have here at Suffolk about 27 data scientists. Okay, most construction companies probably have 2, to be candid with you. But again, it's all about investing in the future. And I believe the idea, like Billy Bean had in baseball, by using data, okay, you being much more proactive in coming up with problem solving on a job site. But the ultimate goal in our industry, Chris, is how do you be predictive in our job site? Mm-hmm. And right now, our data scientists are working on a project called Project Tripwire. We have 8 different categories that we've identified that if you have certain behaviors on a job site relating to those categories, it can be more predictive on the success of that particular project. I'll give you a perfect example. If you change out any of your teammates on a project, when you're running a project in the first 20%, there's a 60% chance your job goes south on you at the end of the day because of that continuity, because of that loss of information and the loss of relationships. And there's a bunch of other tripwires that we're currently using right now to give us that advantage. So if we do trip one of those wires, what is the remedial action plan that is required to take place in order to effectuate a proper solution?
The thing that's going through my head right now is, John, how do you keep up with all this? And I know it's through key leaders, but it's still a lot.
I would say this to you is that I have been very, very fortunate. And as a result of my learning difference, I've had to work a lot harder, and I've never got away from the details. I get in very, very early in the morning, and, I do dishes like most CEOs do. And I try to set an example to the people in this organization. If you winning isn't normal. That's a slogan I have all over my office. And people say to me, what is winning isn't normal? What does that mean? Well, think about Tom Brady. Think about Michael Phelps. What did it take them? And I'm no Tom Brady and Michael Phelps, don't misunderstand me. But what did it take those gentlemen to win? Okay, it took an extraordinary effort, a discipline, a focus, but most importantly, two things: caring and compassion for the people around you, and a high degree of humility. Because at the end of the day, you and I both know, Chris, people are faster, smarter, quicker, and have more money than you do, and I do at the end of the day. So why do you do it at the end of the day? It's because you're passionate and you love what you do. And the day that you get up in the morning in bed and you don't feel that way, it's time to check out, hang the cleats. And Brady found out, as you well know, he put the cleats back on.
Man, Billy Bean. That was a great movie. John, that was a great way to close out this episode.
Chris, I just want to thank you for having this time with you. You run a wonderful organization, a great show, and I'm proud to be involved in it.
Well, I hopefully I'll meet up with you at some point. My whole dad's side of the family grew up in New England. My dad actually lives outside of Boston, so maybe I live down here in Austin, Texas, but perhaps I'll meet up with you in Boston next time I'm up there.
Love to get together. Look forward to it. And thanks again, too.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to CEO Secrets. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, whether you're on Spotify, Anchor, or iTunes. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time. Be sure to look up John Fish, incredible leader, and super exciting stuff he's working on. I'll see everybody next time. Bye, guys.